Tinc el micro obert ja.
Ja pots, Esteve.
Hola, muy buena tarde. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Estamos ya en la segunda actividad de la Escuela de Salud Pública de Menorca de este año 2020, la edición número 31, que como todos sabéis, pues es un poco especial. Especial porque estamos delante de las pantallas, porque la hemos llevado a virtual a causa de la pandemia de COVID, y especial porque además, a causa de la misma pandemia, la estamos dedicando justamente a poder reflexionar sobre diferentes aspectos de la misma. It's for me a pleasure, esta sesión tenemos una invitada y toda la sesión será en inglés, por lo que a partir de ahora empezaremos ya en inglés y continuaremos así durante toda la sesión. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here introducing the second activity of the Menorca School of Public Health. As you surely know, this is a special edition, not because it is the 31st edition, but because we have gone virtual due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And also, we decided to devote all the activities to have some reflection of different topics related to the epidemic. So it's my pleasure to be here. All the session will be in English. We have we have a speaker, Hoen, that will be introduced by my colleague Irene Bernal from the It's Not Healthy campaign, an advocacy platform devoted to promoting and advocating for universal access to medicines. And this is the topic of the session. We will be talking about patents for pandemic times, and Irene will be introducing our speaker. First, I wish to thank also the different authorities and institutions that made this School of Public Health possible. The Menorcan Institute of Studies, the island of Menorca government, as well as the regional government of the Balearic Islands. Also, the University of the Balearic Islands are providing support for all these activities. So thank you very much to all of them, and also to all the people working for several months from the Menorcan Institute of Studies to have this new format for all of us with the different activities selected for the school. After my short introduction, we will have also a short video with the welcome of these institutions that will be in Spanish, and after this, Irene will start the session. Just let me remind that during all the session, the chat in WebEx will be open, and the attendees are asked to provide comments, questions to Ellen. We will collect all of them, and at the end of the speech, there will be several minutes, about 10 or 15 minutes, to provide with these questions and have some other comments from Ellen. Nothing more else. I'm very happy to be introducing this second activity. We have a very interesting program available too in the website of the School of Public Health of Menorca, and I encourage you to review the different sessions and go over them and also attend them tomorrow and next week on Monday, Tuesday, and also Wednesday at the same time. Thank you very much. Now we will have the video, and will be your turn, Irene. Thank you very much. I haven't thanked you and Ellen for accepting this invitation, and thank you very much for the cooperation of It's Not Healthy. And I suppose they will be introducing also with more detail the platform. Again, thank you very much. It's our pleasure to have you, and thank you very much to all the attendees that I'm sure will enjoy with this activity. Thank you. Let's go with the video.
Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a todos y a todas a esta 31 edición de esta Escuela de Salud Pública, una edición virtual por primera vez en la historia de la Escuela de Salud Pública, que lo que pretende es no obviar un debate más importante que nunca en los momentos que estamos viviendo, inmersos aún en una crisis sanitaria sin precedentes, ante la incertidumbre de encontrar esa anhelada vacuna, ese anhelado tratamiento que permita que nuestra sociedad vuelva a vivir en parámetros de normalidad. En este encuentro que dista un poco de lo que ha sido hasta ahora, todos tenemos en mente el Lazareto y ese entorno tan maravilloso en cuanto a su ubicación, en cuanto a todas las posibilidades que nos ofrece, pero también el conocimiento se comparte a través de las redes y hemos querido hacer que este encuentro sea también muy especial. Es el momento de dar respuestas a aquellas preguntas que todos tenemos en la cabeza todos los días y que no acabamos de tener una respuesta clara. Revisar las experiencias de gestión y también revisar las buenas prácticas, las lecciones aprendidas, los proyectos de éxito que han resultado ser exitosos. Construyéndolos, compartimos ciencia y esa es la forma de seguir avanzando.
Creo que se pone de relieve la importancia de la salud pública como especialidad sanitaria, que cada vez más requiere recursos, requiere atención para dar una atención a toda la ciudadanía y promover el bienestar social. Es, por tanto, una reunión, quizás desde el punto de vista holístico, que será de gran ayuda para tomar decisiones de presente y de futuro.
Un año diferente, el 2020, un año en que realizamos la escuela en un formato virtual, pero no por ello un año menos importante. Os quiero agradecer a todos vuestra presencia y acompañamiento un año más para hacer que sea un éxito rotundo, porque se ha demostrado que es más necesario que nunca seguir apostando por la salud pública y porque la escuela se ha reinventado para ser un punto de encuentro, no solo a nivel físico en la Chalet, sino también a nivel virtual.
Evidentemente, la crisis de la COVID es un problema para todo el mundo, pero lo vamos a aprovechar entre todos como una oportunidad. Una oportunidad para aprender a luchar juntos contra esta pandemia, contra sus consecuencias negativas para todo el género humano en definitiva, y lo vamos a aprovechar también para generar conocimiento. Esta escuela no tiene formato de cursos, tiene más bien formato de reflexión compartida, pues vamos a aprovecharlo entre todos para generar conocimiento, para generar sabiduría, para que juntos podamos luchar mejor contra esta pandemia que evidentemente no nos dejará iguales de cómo entramos en ella.
Irene, thank you very much again, and Sultan.
Bueno, pues lo primero, buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Placer estar aquí y bueno, pues voy a cambiar a inglés, pero bueno, no quería antes de empezar saludarles y agradecerles a tanto a las personas que participan en este evento como a la Escuela de Salud Pública de Menorca. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Menorca's Public Health School for inviting Noesano to be part of this exciting week, full of relevant discussions about COVID-19 and greatly important in the current context. Noesano has participated in previous editions and it's always a pleasure to be part of this initiative. But I want to thank especially to Esteve Fernández, Matías Torrent, Ildefonso Hernández, Clement García, and all the technical and communication crew for doing their magic and making possible this event. Well, many of you already know about Noesano, although I will just go briefly about who we are and our demands. Noesano is a campaign coordinated by Salud por Derecho, which we convey civil society, health professionals, organizations, and consumers with a common goal: access to affordable, effective, and safe medicines, vaccines, and health technologies. During the last 5 years, we have brought discussions like the one we will have today to different spheres, liaising with experts, decision makers, health professionals, students, and the society as a whole. We need urgent policy changes regarding pharmaceutical policies. Those would go through sharing or pooling knowledge and data instead of enforcing exclusivities and IP rights, fostering transparency and the cost of medicines, and the investments on research and development of medicines to set up fair prices instead of secrecy and confidentiality. There is a great portion of public funding investments into medicines and vaccines. We have seen it with COVID-19, the great public funding that is supporting R&D, which has been the seed of many products that now are on clinical trials phase. All those investments need to be reverted to the public systems and the society as a whole, applying to certain conditions when public money is involved in R&D, such as access to data, knowledge, for price of the product, and so on. However, other alternatives like funding for independent research should be a priority for the government, as well as research agenda driven by people's needs, health needs, and not profits. We have also recalling the government binding instruments which could be used in case access to medicines is denied or an obstacle for whatever reasons. Compulsory licenses are indeed an option that so far neither the current Spanish government nor previous one has considered under any circumstances, although it's in a patent law emanated from the Doha Declaration. We have requested more transparency, not only regarding R&D costs, real prices of cost of clinical trials, and around decisions of reimbursements and decisions with the committee responsible for setting the prices of medicines. Things can be done at regional and national level. It's just a matter of political willingness and applies as well to other transparency issues such as conflict of interest, and a lot more can be done in this area. The campaign has targeted regulators and decision makers, and certain steps taken, but is still so much ahead, especially under this context. The rules of the game must change, certainly because we are talking about lives, and access to medicines can make a difference between living or dying. During the last months, we have become familiar with terms like universal access to a vaccine or the treatment, or vaccines as a public good. But what does this mean? But even more important, what this implies. When we talk about access to medicines, we're talking about patents. The discussion can now be either avoided or delayed, because at the end, we are talking about treatments and vaccines or all, regardless country or place of residence. In 1952, Jonas Salk, the scientist who discovered the polio vaccine, at the moment an epidemic was dividing nations into health crisis, was asked by a journalist, but who owns the patent of this vaccine? And he said, the people, I would say, but there is no patent. Could you patent the sun? It is indeed a pleasure for me to introduce you the most admired person in this field of access to medicine. She's not only one of the most reliable sources and knowledgeable person, also a reference for activists and researchers like myself for her great contributions to this field. Her clarity and always well-presented ideas are always food for thoughts, and I'm sure the audience will enjoy it very much. Dr. Helen Hoen is a lawyer and public health advocate with over 30 years of experience working on pharmaceutical and intellectual property policies. For more than 10 years, she was the director of policy and advocacy of the Access campaign at MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières. In 2009, she joined Unitate in Geneva to set up the Medicines Patent Pool. She was the first executive director of MPP until 2012. In 2005, 6, 10, 11, she was listed as one of the most 50 influential people in intellectual property by the journal Managing Intellectual Property. She has worked as an advisor to several governments, NGOs, and international organizations. She's currently a researcher at the University of Groningen, the Netherlands. In 2020, she was appointed officer at the Order of Orange Nassau, a royal award given by the King for her international work on equitable access to affordable medicines. She has published widely on medicine's law and policy issues. Her latest book, Private Patents on Public Health, Changing Intellectual Property Rules for Public Health, was published in 2016, and I highly recommend it. She has Master of Laws from the University of Amsterdam and PhD from the University of Groningen. Helen, thank you so much for being with us today. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irene, for this very generous introduction. It is a pleasure to be with you, although I deeply regret not being physically in Menorca, but speaking to you from my bedroom/office. But nevertheless, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I have a presentation which I will start now. I hope all the technology will be on our side. Can you see the presentation? Yes? All right. And let me know if there are any problems. So I was asked to talk about patents for pandemic times, and I'll do that, but I'll also give a little bit of an introduction about what patents actually are, what they're meant to do for society. Before I do that, here is my conflict of interest declaration. I am receiving a small fee for this lecture. Otherwise, I'm self-employed. I work with a group of like-minded people, mostly lawyers. We work for non-for-profits, academia, governments, the United Nations, not for private corporations. Our work is open access and freely available on our website, including the book. I always say, when you're rich, you buy the book. If you're not rich, you can download it for free on the website. So on to patents. Patents are part of a set of rules and regulations that are called intellectual property rights. But patents specifically is the right to exclude others from making, using, offering for sale, selling, and importing the patented product or the patented invention. So a patent holder, this is sometimes referred to as a negative right. You have the right to exclude others from using your invention. It also gives you, of course, the opportunity to give others, to authorize others to use your inventions, such as is done through licensing. Now, patents are in general a minimum, run for a minimum of 20 years from the date of application. This is an international norm and applies in all countries that provide patents. Very important to keep in mind that patents are national. They're global rules and regulations. They're global procedures for applications for patent, but a global patent does not exist. So that also means that there are no global mechanisms to deal with patents when there are problems. Now, the function of patents is to encourage inventors to make investments in time and money to develop new products, such as medicines or other technologies, in exchange for the disclosure of the invention. So a patent system is a social policy tool to create benefits for society and for society as a whole. It is not a mechanism to provide benefits to the patent holder alone or to provide benefits to corporations exclusively. It has to be seen in a social, societal context. It comes with a cost to society because patents create, and I'll go into that in greater detail in a minute, create monopolies, and monopolies usually cost money. That is also why patent law has public interest safeguards, such as the compulsory licenses that Irene mentioned earlier. A government can intervene when the government feels that the patent holder is, for example, charging prices that the society cannot afford or not making the invention available. Then government can step in and take measures. Almost all patent laws in the world have that provisions. Now, this societal benefit view of the patent system is not shared by all sectors of society. For example, if you here's a quote from the commercial sector that sees very much patents as a key element of life cycle management of a product, and to use this patent protection for as long as possible. So extending patents through evergreening of patents, for example, is a well-known tactic to keep generic competitors off the market. For the pharmaceutical industry, the patents are absolutely key. Now, I'm not inviting you to read every line of this slide. This slide gives you some cancer medicines, some other mostly antiviral medicines. But look, for example, you can pick any one. The story is the same for every drug. It gives the price per pill and the target price per pill, which is actually the cost of production. And you see an enormous discrepancy. Take daclatasvir, it's a product used in a combination treatment for the treatment of hepatitis C. And you see here the differences. The current treatment price in the UK is around $31,000 per treatment, while this treatment could be made available at cost plus a markup. This actually includes some profit for the generic manufacturer at $6.72. These are the prices, these target prices, those are the prices that you see emerge once a patent expires and generic competition is possible in the market. So this also shows why patents are so important for the commercial pharmaceutical industry, because with those patents, they maintain monopolies in the market that allows them to charge high prices. This slide tells you the same story, except it has a pretty picture. This is a 1-year supply of pomalidomide, which is an anti-cancer drug. This is 1 gram of this product, which costs, so the price, this cost to the National Health Services in the UK is a bit more than £100,000, while the cost to produce this is £100 per year. Again, same story. These are all studies mostly done by Andrew Hill and his team, and the references are in the slides, and I'm happy to share the slides with you. So in summary, patents allow pricing well above the cost of production by providing the patent holder a monopoly. And as soon as patents expire, in general, generic competition drives the price of a medicine down. But it's important to realize that there are other non-patent based market exclusivities, and those are derived mostly from regulatory exclusivity. And I'll just talk you quickly through the array of market exclusivities that are granted to pharmaceutical companies in the European Union. The European Union has the most generous regime of market exclusivity for pharmaceuticals. Now, this slide, the top part of this slide, which is in gray and purple, these are all patent-based exclusivities. This here is the 20-year exclusivity, and then under EU law, companies, upon expiration of the patent, can obtain a supplementary protection certificate of up to 5 years, which extends, in fact, which extends the patent, provided that there is a registered product and that there is a base patent. It's not relevant to every single patent, but this is already quite a generous extension. Then the pink and red part, these are all exclusivities that are granted through the so this is patents, patent extensions. This is data exclusivity. This is the period of 8 years during which a generic company cannot apply for a marketing authorization, which is extended standard with 2 to 3 years of market exclusivity, during which period a generic manufacturer cannot market the product. there is a separate market exclusivity for orphan medicines. And this is independent of the patent status. So these exclusivities can be obtained, and they're obtained automatically upon registration of these medicines by pharmaceutical companies. Now, the market exclusivity for orphan drugs runs 10 years, which can be extended with 2 years if there is a pediatric indication. There are the kind of safeguards that you see in patent law does not exist in regulatory law. So if for whatever reason you would need to lift data exclusivity or orphan drug exclusivity for that matter, it is not possible. The rules do not provide for that, which is a real issue within the European Union that needs to be fixed. Now, I want to take you a little bit into the history, and particularly the history of HIV medicines, because there are a lot of lessons that can be learned for the current situation. The first triple combination effective medicines for the treatment of HIV/AIDS became available around 1996. And when I say available, I should add available in high-income countries, because in the vast number of low and middle-income countries where the millions of people with HIV lived, those medicines were not available. The price was very high, between 20,000 to 25,000 per patient per year. There were no efforts at the time to make those medicines available. This led, of course, to protests, and particularly when it became clear through the production of generic AIDS medicines, which were possible in India, because India at the time did not grant pharmaceutical product patents. So Indian generic manufacturers started to make these generic AIDS medications, including the triple combination. Here you see Triimmune, one of the first WHO recommended fixed dose combinations that includes 3 antiretroviral medicines. But the problem was that even though these drugs were relatively cheap, they cost $1 a day, that meant fundable, they could not be made available in most developing countries because of patents. If you have even only one patent on one component of a triple therapy, this product could not be imported into that country, which led to all kinds of patent conflicts around the world. These issues were debated at various international fora, and Irene already mentioned the Doha Declaration on TRIPS and Public Health, which was adopted in 2001 by the World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference, which is an absolute a turning point. This was a very, very important declaration. It's only a page and a half long, and I would anyone interested in this matter encourage you to look it up and read it through. It made it absolutely clear that countries could intervene for the purpose of public health when patents formed a barrier. This here is paragraph 4 of the Doha Declaration, which clearly states that the TRIPS agreement, that is the international set of rules, the minimum standards for the protection of intellectual property, including patents, does not and should not prevent members from taking measures to protect public health. And this particularly refers to the use of measures such as compulsory licensing and other flexibilities that exist in the TRIPS agreement. One important flexibility that exists for the low-income countries, the least developed countries, is that they don't have to grant or enforce pharmaceutical pharmaceutical patent protection, and you'll see in a minute why that is important. Now, these flexibilities of the TRIPS agreement have been used on a rather large scale to enable the trade in these generic medicines that were mostly produced in India. I mapped them for the period between 2001 and 2016. And this database is actually available on our website. But I found around 100 cases of the use of compulsory licensing and government use. That is the government using a patent for his own purposes, such as procurement of medicines, for example. And also the least developed countries started to use this non-enforcement mechanism to just import whether there were patents or not. Most cases, this concerned medicines for HIV. In 2001, with the support of United, the medicines patent pool was established in order to have a mechanism that was more predictable and a mechanism that would deal with the new antiretroviral medicines that were patented in India or would be patented in India. So that mechanism of the automatic generic low-cost supply that was possible because of the Indian Patents Act was slowly disappearing because India, also a member of the World Trade Organization, as of 2005, started to grant, it had to start to grant pharmaceutical product patents. So unless you have predictable voluntary licensing, you would have had a situation where every patent had to be dealt with country by country, compulsory license by compulsory license. That does not create a predictable market for generic producers to actually invest in the production of these medicines. So the medicines patent pool is a mechanism that offered that. It wasn't at all clear in 2010 that it would succeed, but today I think it's fair to say that this has been very successful. All WHO recommended treatments for HIV, for example, are licensed to the medicines patent pool that included pipeline medicines, so that really accelerated the availability of new medicines in low and middle income countries. The medicines patent pool has been expanded recently to also work on COVID-19. They already had all essential medicines within their mandate, and it's backed by the United Nations and financially supported by United and a number of governments. But the medicines patent pool is now also engaged in COVID-19, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So to talk about the current pandemic, COVID-19, there is a tremendous need for new therapeutics. As we know, what is there today is not sufficient. There is an enormous amount of research and development activity at the moment. I need to take a sip of water. You probably noticed that my voice is not very well. I'm recovering from a cold, at least that's what I hope it is. New chemical entities, those new medicines are likely to be under monopoly rights. I'll talk in a minute about remdesivir. Other research and development projects focused on repurposing older molecules. So those are known compounds, mostly available in generic form. And an example of that is dexamethasone, which has shown some effectiveness in treatment of COVID-19. Vaccines will be new and likely be patented, or parts of the technology will be patented, and the same will be true for diagnostics. Now, a few words about remdesivir, with the remark that we all would have wished it to be a much better medicine than it actually is. So I'm not highlighting remdesivir because of its medical importance, but because we all can already draw some lessons from it also for other medicines. So this is an antiviral. It was originally developed for West African Ebola by the US government. It has benefited enormously from US government investments. It's actually US government clinical trials that showed effectiveness in COVID-19. It invested around $70.5 million in that. The product is marketed by Gilead. Gilead Sciences also holds the patents on the product. In March of this year, and this was a bit of a very odd move by Gilead, Gilead applied and received from the Food and Drug Administration an orphan drug designation for the indication COVID-19, because at the time the number of cases in the US were very little. This happened only a few days before Dr. Tedros, the Director General of the WHO, declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Now, Gilead has rescinded this orphan drug status after public criticism, but it was an early signal that companies were developing commercial strategies with these products. We heard a lot of talk about things will be different, this won't be business as usual. But if you actually look at how companies behave, this is very much business as usual. And they treat this as market opportunity as they do with any other disease. In May, Gilead received emergency use authorization by the US FDA and a similar type of authorization by the European Medicines Agency in June. Now, remdesivir is widely patented. The last to expire patent will be in 2036. Gilead has announced its price to be between $2,000 and $3,000 for high-income countries. The cost of production of that same treatment course is $5. So here you see that the profitability of this product is significant. Gilead has licensed the patents to generic companies in India, Pakistan, and Egypt for supply in 127 developing countries. These manufacturers cannot supply anywhere else. But in Bangladesh, Bangladesh is the least developed country. Generic producer there is making remdesivir at a much lower price and donating it for public use in Bangladesh. And here's an example of a least developed country making use of the maximum flexibility that the TRIPS agreement provides. Now, the entire production capacity of Gilead for the time being has been bought up by the United States. So other countries that want to have access to remdesivir production would have to go to other suppliers, but if there are patents in their countries, they would have to use compulsory licensing to do so. We have not seen the Gilead license agreement because it has not been made public. Transparency in the whole COVID-19 R&D sphere is a real issue, but Gilead has assured me when I asked them directly that their licensees are allowed to supply to countries that issue a compulsory license. Now, the European Commission has made a purchase deal with Gilead of 63 million for 30,000 treatments, and that is 6 doses per treatment, which comes down to around 2,000 per patient per treatment. And again, that is the treatment that cost €5 or $5, so it's in euros is a bit less to make. So, of course, we hope that there is, as I said, the usefulness of remdesivir is limited, and we all wish for the development of better products. But when that happens, those newer products will likely be, in terms of patent protection and the monopolies around them, be very similar to remdesivir, and that is something that needs to be tackled. Now, vaccines and patents is a slightly different story. If you look at remdesivir, if you have access to the patent, or if there is no patent, most generic companies that are active in this field can produce a product. But with vaccines, that's different. You don't just need access to the patents. For that, you need the transfer of intellectual property, of course. This can be multiple patents, but also the transfer of knowledge and know-how. Transfer of cell lines may be involved, and technology transfer. Some people refer to that as deep technology transfer, to make sure that the vaccine produced elsewhere is exactly the same, meets the same specifications as the original vaccine. So this transfer is more complex than just patent licensing. This is also why the WHO has established the COVID-19 Technology Access Pool, announced in May of this year. This will be a voluntary mechanism for the sharing of intellectual property, knowledge, know-how, data, technology. It's voluntary because there is no international mechanism to do this on a non-voluntary basis. You cannot, at an international level, force anyone to engage with a patent pool like this. You could do that at the national level, but not at the international level. So this is meant to ensure that no monopolies stand in the way to scale up production at low cost. The partners in this endeavor are the World Health Organization, the Open COVID Pledge, the Medicines Patent Pool, and Unitate. There are, at the moment, and this is where the opportunity for the COVID-19 technology access pool really is, the unprecedented amounts of public financing made available for research and development. The current pledge that was undertaken under the leadership of the European Commission stands at almost 16 billion. A large amount of this is going directly to research and development of vaccines and therapeutics and diagnostics. This is the opportunity to require that this knowledge that is generated with public financing is shared, that knowledge remains publicly available and remains and becomes available for others who need access to it in order to produce these products. This is not happening. So this money is going out the door without such strings attached, and that is problematic. In particular, since the calls from the European Parliament adopted a resolution, for example, clearly instructing the European Commission to do these things differently, to support formally the COVID-19 technology access pool, to have safeguards in favor of public regarding public funding, but the Commission has not moved beyond the publication, and here's a glimmer of hope, beyond the publication of the European Commission's manifesto for EU COVID-19 research and development, in which they call upon their grantees to, and I draw your attention to the third bullet, to, where possible, grant non-exclusive royalty-free licenses on the intellectual property resulting from EU-funded research. This is a useful manifesto, but it would be more useful if this was translated into terms and conditions that are attached to the grants. If you give someone a couple of billion to do something, you can make conditions. You can say, here are a few things we want you to do with this money. This is public money after all. So this is the point I was just making. This manifesto is not translated into terms and conditions of the grants and subsidies the EC, the European Commission, spends on COVID-19 research and development. What that means is, if this does not change, the chances of the WHO COVID-19 technology access pool filling up are diminished, because the leverage is really with the funders. So there's work to be done there. I think it's very important that people working in public health, people like yourselves, engage in advocacy towards this to move this forward. I think our political leaders need to hear from us, and we need to communicate to them very clearly that we want them to step up the efforts and change this practice. Now, a word about compulsory licensing. I've mentioned it before in relation to HIV. It's very interesting that COVID-19 and the challenges, the problems that we saw fairly quickly with countries closing their borders, India saying we will not export any medicines for a while, the sense of dependency on active pharmaceutical ingredients from India and China has caused, interestingly enough, has sort of refueled interest in compulsory licensing. So there's a bit of a drive to break free from that dependency. Here are just a few examples, and most of them, or actually all of them, concern high-income countries and OECD countries. Germany very quickly amended its patent law to make compulsory licensing in the context of COVID-19 easier and quicker, and gave the Minister of Health the mandate to, or the competency to issue a compulsory license if a patent is a problem. Canada made it very easy. Canada now can issue compulsory licenses and sort out compensation later. There's no prior negotiations required. Chile adopted the declaration saying that the coronavirus outbreak justifies the use of compulsory licensing. And in March, Israel actually issued a compulsory license for lopinavir ritonavir, which is an investigative drug. It's actually an HIV drug, but it's being tested for the use in COVID-19. What's interesting about this case is that the company AbbVie, who holds the patents on these compounds, immediately said, we won't enforce any of our patents anywhere for any purpose, anywhere on the planet. So with one compulsory license, the whole patents for these drugs sort of disappeared overnight. That was quite interesting. But we have to keep in mind that compulsory licensing has limited usefulness in technologies that need deep tech transfer, such as vaccines. In the European Union, compulsory licensing would have to happen by each member state. There's no EU-wide compulsory license possible. And many high-income countries, this includes the entire European Union, have opted out of TRIPS 31 bis. 31 bis is the part of the compulsory licensing regulation in the TRIPS agreement that sets out the rules for compulsory license for export. And what it means is that those countries who've opted out cannot use the mechanism when they want to import a product that is produced under a compulsory license elsewhere in another country. They've said at the time in 2003, they've said, we won't make use of that. Clearly not imagining that we would ever be in a situation we are in today. So it would be important to urge countries to rethink that and figure out a way to opt back in. That was an unwise decision in 2003, and it remains unwise even more today. So I'll let you look at this beautiful slogan, the people's vaccine. There's a very strong drive from many people around the globe, many of them important political leaders, to advocate for the people's vaccine. A bit like Jonas Salk, can you patent the sun? This should be this vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, should be free of monopolies and should be the people's vaccine. We've heard a lot of very good talk about that. The French president Emmanuel Macron said no one should own this vaccine. Angela Merkel talked about this needs to be a global public good. We hear a lot of talk about the global public good, but saying it should be a global public good does not make it so. There are UN resolutions that say it should be seen as a global public good, but you need to do things to make that happen, because the default is a commercial industry that will seek to fit this into its own business model. We see already it is business as usual. Not only that, the high-income countries that speak these beautiful words are also the countries that, with only 13% of the world population, have already bought up more than 50% of the vaccine production of COVID-19. So there is a disconnect between what is being said and what is pledged, and what those leaders of high-income countries promise and what high-income countries actually do. So this drive for a people's vaccine is very important, not only because it will help to ensure that the knowledge that is needed to produce a vaccine is and remains available, but also to make sure that there's an agreement on how the first vaccines are going to be distributed. It cannot be so that people in high-income countries at low risk get the vaccine, while a healthcare worker in South Africa cannot get the vaccine. So for equitable distribution and to ensure that it is distributed to people at risk first, globally, international agreements will have to be made, and that will require a strong advocacy to make that happen. Now, a final thought before my voice completely gives out, I'm afraid, is from John Sulston, a wonderful man. He unfortunately is no longer with us. He died much too young. He led the Human Genome Project, and he really worked to make sure that the human genome mapping that he was involved in, that he was leading, would be in the public domain. And for his work, he got the Nobel in 2002, the Nobel for Medicine. But he said in 2008, this was at a meeting that was organized by Médecins Sans Frontières, intellectual property in the form of patents should be thought of as a very useful tool with a relatively narrow applicability, rather than as a means for owning ever larger swaths of human knowledge, which is the way it is being driven at the moment. And that, again, unfortunately, we see today. But I think this is a very nice way of thinking about intellectual property and giving it the place that it can take up in society, and push it back to where it belongs, and not let it sort of, as he said, be used to own knowledge that should actually be shared and available to all. So with that, I thank you. I hope I've given you a sort of an introduction of patents and how these discussions relate to what is happening today with COVID-19. There are important lessons that we can learn from the past. Now, humans are very good at not learning from the past, so we have to make sure, we have to take deliberate action to make sure that indeed happens. You'll find a lot more information on the website. If you're interested, you can also sign up for our newsletter on the website, or follow me on Twitter if you think that might be interesting. And with that, I turn it over to Irene. Thank you.
Irene?
Helen. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Helen, for such a great presentation and for your insights. A lot to take and digest, I guess, especially in a moment like this. I want to go, if I may, I want to go over a couple of things that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, and that we hear very often, because it's always what is in the back of this discussion, is that IP rights are seen as an incentive, but they really work like that. So my first impression is that there is a sort of unbalance gain between incentive for pharmaceuticals and the public interest. It exists this fully blind confidence about the risk that the pharmaceuticals are taking and the reward that they deserved. And the longer I can extend it, my patent, the better. So this is also seen like that we've seen it with the rules and regulations set up by the EU that you very well explained it. But it doesn't go over data. It doesn't go over a specific case by each medicine. So of course, that the development of a medicine, it's quite a complex issue. All of us, we know and agree on that. But we should also agree on reasonable margins, and we also should agree on fair prices. However, the fact is that the lack of transparency but what is behind each medicines and how much the company has invested, the cost of clinical trials, it remains unknown. So national patent offices can be granting, for instance, SPC, as you mentioned, but which have already sufficiently covered the investments made by R&D. What can be done with that, Helen? What kind of measures can we take on that?
First, a few comments on this statement that we need patents, we need intellectual property in order to incentivize the innovation. It's interesting what you see in COVID-19 is that governments are not saying, oh, well, we'll just sit back and let's wait and see what the intellectual property system will bring, because after all these incentives, and they're generous incentives are there. No, what they have done is brought vast amounts of money together that is now directly being spent on research and development. Don't get me wrong, I think that that's a very, very good idea. I actually think that's a much more efficient way to incentivize research and development, just pay for it directly, than the intellectual property system. But when you incentivize, when you spend 20 billion on the development of vaccines and therapeutics, then you also have to ask yourself the question, do these inventors also then need, on top of their 20 billion, 20-year patents and 10 years data exclusivity and whatever else? I think the answer to that should be no. When you are awarded because your research and development has been paid up front, the risk is, well, it isn't even shared, the risk is taken away. The financial risk is being carried by the public sector. So the return should also be immediate to the public sector. So that is what we see very clearly in the COVID-19 sphere now. This lays very clearly bare how that innovation system works. Now, how to deal with this generous incentive, particularly what we have in the European Union? You quite rightly point out that these incentives are given almost automatically. There is no check whether it's actually necessary. You can get an orphan drug designation for a medicine that already is making a lot of money, or that turns out to be a blockbuster. And what we've been advocating for, and we have those briefing papers on our website where we discuss these various incentives, and we've been advocating for the introduction of a sufficiency principle, whereby you actually say, when is enough enough? When has it run long enough? At which point can you turn some of that back? So instead of having a one-size-fits-all incentive mechanism, very much based on the idea exclusivities are good, more exclusivities are better. That has been very much the spirit, has driven the EU regulation, and that needs to be ruled back. The EU regulations are under review as we speak. This is as a result of a council decision in 2016. It's moving very slowly, but I'm hoping that those evaluations that are being done, those reviews that are being done, that will lead to legislative change, and that legislative change introduces some kind of system by which you can put the brake on it when incentives have been sufficient. The other issue is, of course, are we going to learn from COVID-19? Wouldn't it be wiser for some of the R&D needs to just finance it directly? If you think of the orphan drugs, giving market exclusivity for orphan drugs, which are not developed because the markets are too small. So why would market exclusivity give you anything? Why not just spend the money directly on the development of these medicines, and then they can go to market at much lower prices? We now see orphan drugs go to market at hundreds and thousands, if not millions, per treatment course, and it doesn't have to be like that when you actually front load the R&D cost. But that will require a change in the rules, and that's not going to be easy.
Yeah. Yes, you mentioned that with the pandemic, the context with the European Parliament, as well as the call for solidarity with the Seed Hub. But why is not happening? We do have past experiences. I remember yourself in a TED talk talking about this pooling of patents to produce airplanes that actually I follow up a little bit later. So do you think that this kind of things can really happen with the COVAX?
Well, I think the opportunity here is, the COVAX is more of a procurement facility. That is an advanced market market commitment in which the high-income countries are not sufficiently participating. So that is a problem. As I said, they're making their own deals, and they're probably going down the road of providing financing to the COVAX facility. So instead of solidarity, we get charity, and that's regretful, because if the countries would pool forces through the COVAX facility, they could have global procurement, low prices, and equitable distribution agreements. The sharing of the knowledge and the sharing of the intellectual property. Of course, I'm disappointed that the WHO COVID-19 access pool doesn't have anything in it yet. But in all fairness, it also only exists since a few months, and it took 10 years to set up the medicines patent pool. So let's hope this does not take 10 years. We haven't got 10 years to get this. No. We don't have to, because we've done it before. We know how to do it. So we could actually move a whole lot faster. But where the problem lies is with the donors, is with the countries that are spending the money on the research and development. If they do not ask from those who receive that money to share the knowledge that they produce with that money, that public money, share that knowledge publicly, it will be very difficult to get that pool up and running. It's not only a role of the governments, there are also other entities, CEPI, for example, that funds a lot of research and development, but also with public money. You have charitable foundations, the Wellcome Trust, the Gates Foundation. They all could play a role in making that happen. And we need a political drive for that. Some governments are very much behind it. Others are still trying to understand what is this all about. And the WHO is still in the process of formulating its strategy. All of that needs to be accelerated. But the window of making it happen is now that the money is going out of the door. So the European Commission should also be a target, in particular since they've put out this manifesto with some pretty good language about sharing the knowledge that they fund. And they should be asked, what do you actually do to make this happen? Because a manifesto on a website is one thing, but a direct condition on a grant of a couple of billion is quite something else. Over.
Well, this just to finish one more question, Helen. Yesterday, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, talked about an EU BARDA. So, do you think that this is the opportunity for actually doing what you are actually putting on the table, that governments actually include these terms and conditions attached to the contracts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the moment. I think for us to as people working in public health, working on public interest issue and justice, to ask to support this, but to be very clear with the European Commission that this is the opportunity to get that bit of the public knowledge and the sharing of the knowledge, to get that right. If the European BARDA becomes just a financing mechanism for research and development without changing the rules of the game, then that would be a missed opportunity. So this is definitely the moment to do that.
Well, thank you so much, Helen. And I'm now going to go over to Esteve, and I don't know whether you want to include some questions coming from the public.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helen, of course. Very nice explanation and a wide approach to lay people facing for the first time this topic, but I believe that very comprehensive and quite interesting. There are some questions also from the attendees. Thank you very much, Helen, also, Irene, also for these previous questions and dialogue with Helen. Going back to the previous comment, there is a question, let's say from a lay person, that after considering this fact and well, very important and very impressive for all of us coming from public health, for example, that most research is publicly funded. The questions are why this is not as evident for policymakers, governments, and which is the explanation that even in a time of pandemic, this can be changed. So how could the public health people, the people that are involved in different spheres of public health, and even the question says even the public in general, how can they advocate for that? Which would be the
Thank you for that question. Of course, just to clarify, not in general, not all research and development is publicly funded. There are significant investments also from companies, and for some of the COVID-19 products that will also be true. But in general, in COVID-19, we see vast amounts of money, public money, going into research and development. And I think for people who want to get involved is to join the movement for the people's vaccine. Just look it up, sign the petition, get in touch with people who are working on this and see what you can do. I could also imagine schools of public health getting together and ask the governments or to do outreach together with people like Irene at the European level and make those demands. We also begin to see movements of people who have had COVID-19 or who have lost someone to COVID-19 or are at high risk should they get the disease, who are mobilizing, not dissimilar to what we've seen around HIV/AIDS. So I think we will see more and more sort of public movements getting involved in this. And if the health professionals hook up with those movements, that would be very very important. And as Irene pointed out, the establishment in Europe or in the European Union of a BARDA-like financing mechanism, that is really the moment to put the demand on the table there to say we need some rewriting of the rules before this money leaves the door.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Do you want to add something, Irene, for example? Because we have a couple of other questions from the attendees, following more or less with the same. One of the questions says, what alternatives can ensure this universal access to vaccines and treatments? Universal access, equitable, in terms of justice, and especially taking into account the current pandemic situation. I believe it's the 1 million question.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Well, if we a lot of things need to happen, but if we focus on the vaccine, we have to acknowledge, first of all, there is no vaccine, but let's assume that there will be one, possibly multiple vaccines. Then the production needs to be scaled up at an enormous level. Currently, no one has, no single entity has the production capacity that is necessary to produce 7 billion doses, and that is what needs to happen. So the making sure that enough production capacity is developed, and that should happen now, and that can happen now in all the regions of the planet, so that once we know which vaccines should be used, that production can be ramped up. So that is one thing that needs to happen. The other thing is a very clear agreement as to how the first vaccines are going to be distributed, to where, to who are the priority groups of people that will get the vaccine first, and that needs international agreements. That is difficult in today's political climate, particularly the United States, that has walked away, the current administration at least has walked away from anything that has a multilateral underpinning. And that, of course, is what you need. You need a functioning United Nations. You need a functioning, well-funded World Health Organization to make all of these things happen. But let's be positive. November is around the corner. Things let's hope, change there. Because I think some of that sort of unilateralism of the US has driven also the unilateralism and the vaccine nationalism that we've seen amongst European countries. So that definitely needs to be turned back. We need a much greater level of solidarity in all of this. For the therapeutics, things might actually be a bit simpler because the medicines patent pool already exists, and they can today already deal with patent licensing of pharmaceuticals. But again, it won't happen without the political drive behind it. So we really need to take these issues to our politicians and explain them to them.
Thank you so much. Very close and linked to this question, another attendee asked whether it's a personal opinion, but this is the question: if you are optimistic and believe that there is room for a change in medicine policies to avoid inequalities. Are you?
Yeah, very much so. I've worked, Irene said 30 years. I was just counting. I thought it's actually almost 40 years. But I need to change the bio on the website again. But I've seen a lot of change in pharmaceutical policies. Maybe it never goes as far as we would like to see, but I've seen things happen that people of which people said that will never happen. I remember, for example, when we took the proposal for a medicines patent pool to Unitate and to a number of governments. Many initially said, this is a crazy idea. This will never happen. No drug company will ever collaborate with that. And if we had listened to those naysayers, we would have just gone away and dropped the idea. Luckily, I think we didn't, because spark of optimism drives change, and the drug companies all came to the table in the end and licensed their IP, in some cases transfer technology. That was a massive shift. Now we need to learn from that and see how things can be expanded and how they can be applied now. The change in regulation, which Irene also brought up, that will be difficult. We cannot deny that the influence of the pharmaceutical industry on policymaking is enormous, is significant. But also there, we've seen in the last decades changes happen, and we see some of that is now also driven by the need to contain cost, and that will only become more urgent because our economies are not expanding anytime soon. So the drive to contain costs and make sure that medicines remain accessible and affordable will become stronger, and that may help drive some of the legislative change that is necessary.
Yes. If I may, Esteve, I do agree with Helen. I think that several changes, seen myself several changes, especially when it comes to putting the issue into the public agenda. It's like 8, 9, 10 years ago, it was much more an issue that it was targeting developing countries. But with the increase of the prices and the crisis that we had with the hepatitis C and medicines, the issue came to the agenda at high-income countries. So, and now with the COVAX ourselves, we're seeing the discussions at society level. So everybody knows that certain rules need to change. So I'm optimistic, and in terms of being aware that things needs to change. But at the same time, I know that in terms of regulation, it's going to take a while, and that is going to be the toughest part of it. But in terms of widespread and the people to learn and to know more about this, I think is a great deal has been done.
I come from tobacco control research and a bit of tobacco control advocacy, and we have elaborated about social climate, anti-smoking social climate, and which has been the influence of this, and most of some actions, interventions, and so on were directed to increase this anti-smoking social climate. I guess whether have you been able to quantify, or do you have knowledge about how social climate would be enforcing the idea of changes in this topic? Because I believe that this is a key question, because people need to know about what the companies and so on are doing, and the need of the governments, or the need of the justice to develop this. So I believe that working in social climate, I don't know whether do you have any indicator about this, or do you think that this is very difficult and not dealing with the population at all, but only with policymakers or decisions?
Well, as what's important in the whole debate on access to medicines pricing, pharmaceutical regulation, is the fact that it in the end it touches everyone, or potentially everyone. So people feel engaged with it, and that will help drive some of the change. It had shifted from an issue that was something to be concerned about in a sort of development sphere, an issue of developing countries, to a realization that this is actually a global problem that touches everyone. And I think with COVID-19 we will even see that more. And it's telling that already you see movements of people who've had COVID-19 or who've had family members with COVID-19 getting involved with the issue of access to vaccines, of access of issues of equitable distribution. I don't have figures, and I haven't studied this, but also we're living it as it all happens at this very moment. But I think a sort of a social justice movement inspired by COVID-19 is by all means, I think, in the cards, and that movement can learn a lot from sort of access to medicines movement that has been very active in the last few decades to push for deeper change.
Irene?
I fully agree with Helen. I do think that the atmosphere created with the COVID-19 and being so close, so that actually have taken to the people to be locked down, to not to get close relations with people, to change so much the way we live, and on the other hand, that we have to wait for this vaccine to come or for these new treatments, and clinical trials have become at the front page of the newspapers, and I don't know, Helen, what would say, but for myself, that a clinical trial actually is in the top of a front new page. That's something that never happened until the COVID-19. So this is an indicator that how important is the access to medicines movement, and how important is some of the things that we have commented today, the changes that need to be undertaken, that now we do have an opportunity to do so. They say that with crisis, everything is moved, and important changes can take place. So we're confident that, of course, with the collaboration of everybody, governments, also the industry, the stakeholders, the civil society, everybody needs to push for a new way of doing things.
Create binding agreements for all state members. And the question is whether do you see feasible the use of this Article 19 to fix the pharmaceutical research and development system?
I don't think that through Article 19 you can fix the pharmaceutical system. It could be used to start negotiations on a research and development treaty, for example, that would be based on these models of what we call delinkage, where you separate the cost of the research and development from the price. So a bit what is now happening in real life with COVID-19, whereby the research and development is financed upfront, and thereby should lead to lower prices. But I don't see that happen within the WHO context anytime soon, because of the political environment. The WHO has been weakened enormously. It is underfunded, and for something like that to work, you need to have some sense of important countries, of important member states, that a multilateral approach is a way forward. Perhaps an alternative would be for like-minded countries to come together to say, let's start negotiations. You can always lift it into the WHO at some point, but let's start negotiations about a fairer sharing of the costs of research and development, and a fair share of the outcome, fair sharing of the outcome of research and development. And that could happen amongst countries, and it's quite possible that such conversations will start taking place because of COVID-19. The G20 is happening as we speak. I don't know what's been on the table there, but I'm sure COVID-19 was a central theme. That there could be different groupings of countries could tackle that. So so the short answer to the question is yes, legally that would be possible, but politically, I don't see that happen this time.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I believe we are almost on time, so perhaps it's the moment to provide. I just would like to invite Ellen to provide some take-home messages, if possible, and also to ask Irene to close the session. Thank you very much from my part, and thank you very much also from the School of Public Health in Menorca. So,
well, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed being with you here tonight. For those of you that are new to this subject and that may despair a bit about the technicalities of these issues, my take-home message would be: do not despair. It's actually all quite simple. Just spend a little bit of time understanding it, and I'll always be willing to come back, hopefully, when we can meet in person, because I would love to see your beautiful island. And do not hesitate to look at the materials on our website. We have quite a number of sort of primers, and there is a basic library on the website. If you want to get into it, then you don't have to search left and right. You can go straight to these sources. And last but not least, I think COVID-19 is an unprecedented opportunity, or should be an unprecedented opportunity for various actors, and that of course includes the industry, to come together and have a conversation about how things can be done differently, learn the lessons, take the lessons from the past, and prevent the delays in access for vulnerable people, and develop a way of providing vaccines, medicines, access to diagnostics based on the principles of solidarity and not on the principles of charity. So that would be my last thought of the day, before my voice completely disappears.
Well, thank you very much, Helen, for these fruitful thoughts and all your insights and these conversations. And I would like also to thank the Menorca Public Health School for inviting us on another year. And it's always a pleasure to be with you. And I think that we have to, although as Helen said, it looks like a complex issue, but we have tackled many topics, and but I would like the audience to take off that things can be done differently, and there is an opportunity as well. So let's be positive, and I wish you a great week of discussions and on the coming sessions that I will try to join as much as possible. And thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you very much again, Ellen, for this talk. I believe we have learned a lot of things, and more, and even more, we know a lot of things that we should know now. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to Irene too, to facilitate your presence, virtual presence. I'm so sorry. Next year we will try to have something in the Yazaret, in the nice building that Irene has in her background. And I also want to thank everybody attending the conference via WebEx or via YouTube, and the contributions you have done. Thank you very much. And also finally, and last but not least, also to all the crew that has allowed this a bit complicated way of communicating, but very effective, and I believe almost perfect. Thank you very much again. And well, the audience cannot applaud, but I'm shaking my hands. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. And we are now closing this session, and hope to find you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Balearic Island time for another very interesting roundtable on the future of public health after the COVID will public health will be different or not? This will be our next topic. Thank you very much. Don't go now